I just wondered what your initial reaction was to the idea of having the cameras follow you around while you were working at sometimes quite stressful moments for all of you.
Yeah, I think Lee was the guinea pig, so I always make him go first with this question, and we learned from him whether to do it or not.
Right. Elyse, the film directors had been out in outside the Brooklyn courthouse that night, and where the film opens, and then approached me about it. And I said I thought I'd be open to it, but it was an institutional decision by the ACLU. And I think, like any legal organization, there was some hesitancy, nervousness, but then they decided that they would start with, slowly. And it ended up being great, I think, because the filmmakers were sensitive to, they can't be rolling when we're talking to a client about something that's privileged or something. And I think for all of us, I think we probably all agree that by the end, they were just so willing to work around our schedule that it ended up being fine. And I reported back to everyone else that I thought that the filmmakers, were going to be sensitive to all that. And I think then everyone else decided. And I think for us, it was a balancing act a little bit, because it can be intrusive to have cameras there. But on the other hand, I think we all felt like we need to get our clients' stories out there and the issues out there. And this was one way to do it. And so it sort of came with the territory of, for civil rights litigation, there's the in-court part, but you really need the public pushing back on certain policies. And given how much is going on in the world, it's hard to break through, and that this was going to be one unusual way for us to do it. So, but I'll let others jump in.
Yeah, does anyone else want to say anything about that?
Elyse was really skillful at, she'd say, Lee's letting us do it. And then, you
right.
something with her, and maybe, let the cameras come to your apartment or film a video for them. And then they go back to Lee, Josh and Chase let me do this. So
exactly.
Other up to get more access, but they were just wonderful to work with. And the camera people also that just everyone was just with us during some of the most intense times. So they were fantastic.
Yeah, and it felt like after it didn't feel like you were conscious of the cameras being there, because I guess you were so involved in your work that wasn't that you got used to them being around. So.
Yeah, I think we got used to them, and I think, as Josh was saying, it almost became like you were just talking to a friend. I spent more time with the cinematographer Sean than I did with my husband, for long stretches of time, and so then it just became like you have this friend in the room with you, during all these intense moments, who you're explaining kind of what's happening, and so building that level of trust and rapport, I think, was also really was crucial, as everyone was saying.
Yeah. And did you want to say anything about the cameras or anything, Chase?
I was very hesitant at first. I think I've had a lot, I've been at the ACLU for about 7.5 years, and a lot of my time has included some aspect of sort of talking about myself as a lawyer, sort of what does it mean to be trans, and using my identity as and my body as sort of a teaching vehicle in and of itself. And I think there are moments when I feel a sense of exhaustion with it. And when the filming was starting, I had just come off of doing a film about Chelsea Manning when she was my client for many years, and there was a film being made. And so I was sort of, hesitant to be in front of a camera, and especially be in front of a cis person holding a camera. I'm very skeptical. And I do think just, it felt very important, and my colleagues were doing it. So it felt, I actually, that to me was not, yes, it was oh, well, they're doing it, but also it felt safer. It felt like a sort of safer way to be in the process of being a narrative device in and of yourself. So I definitely wrestled with it, and Josh and I were sort of in it together, and that helped because we could just sort of have our own dynamic. and we have a long history of working together. So that I think also made me more inclined to do it. And I loved Weiner, so I was like, well, they're good filmmakers. So I agreed in the end, and was glad that I did. It was overall, a really good experience working with the crew.
And as Lee was saying, there's been a lot going on over the last 3.5 years, and there's that kind of exhaustion thing where I've almost forgotten some of the terrible things that the film shows has happened. But one of the things that struck me, as well as all the vital work that you're doing, is the protest footage, because obviously there's been a lot of protests recently, but it was a reminder of, well, even back in January 2017, there were the protests about the Muslim ban. And I guess sort of how heartening is it to see so many people take to the streets, but also does it sort of directly impact your work, the work that you're all doing? Sorry, I know that's sort of a general one. I don't know if anyone.
No. Actually, Chase, I think you should start it here, because I feel like you talk a lot about kind of the power of change in the streets and what it means for change in the courts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I love that the film opens with the the airport footage and the sort of how many people showed up at the Brooklyn courthouse, because I think it is such an incredible reminder that ultimately judges are human beings. Our cases are fought, through narrative in and out of the courtroom, and so there is no winning in court without sort of mass mobilization in the streets. We had this incredible victory in the LGBTQ space at the Supreme Court on June 15th, and there's no way we would have won that case without sort of history of queer people mobilizing. And the day before our decision on the 14th, that 15,000 people showed up for Black trans lives in Brooklyn. And to me, that was the victory. And then those two things together, obviously give you all these different tools. But I think the protest, the people sort of building with each other, the incredible uprisings that we're seeing in this moment are absolutely instrumental for winning in court.
Yeah. You mentioned that Supreme Court decision. I don't know if you and maybe Joshua as well just talk about the significance of it, and also how it kind of the relationship that it has to religious exemptions, maybe into the trans military ban.
Josh, you want to start?
Yeah, well, sure. So I think it's the Bostock decision, is a huge victory for LGBT folks in so many concrete ways, that there are all these federal statutes prohibiting sex discrimination. And, we have been, saying for, 20 years that those statutes include LGBT folks. And even back as Justice Gorsuch says in his opinion, even right after those laws were passed, people went to court saying they should be interpreted to include LGBT folks. I do think there is, the decision isn't like a panacea, is that how you pronounce it? I can never say it correctly, but it, it provides some protections, but at the same time, there's a real risk that, the Supreme Court provides protections on one hand, and then with the other hand, undermines them by, carving out huge religious exemptions to them. Which is something that Brigitte also faces in her work, where you sort of interpret every interaction with someone who's LGBT, down to calling them by their right name or acknowledging that they're married, as a violation of your free exercise of religion. And if you do that, there ends up not being a lot of stuff that remains protected. So I think that is absolutely a critical thing that we need to be ready for in the years ahead.
Did you want to add anything to that, Chase?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it was, having the win in Bostock is, as Josh said, essential for so many things. And at the same time, not only will, our religious exemptions going to be used to chip away at it, and we already saw that later in the, the term. We know that it's coming next term as well. I think, sort of going back to the protest point, we have so many attacks still to fight at the state level and at the federal level, and so to me, the work of, leveraging that victory is work of just continuing to build public support and connect with people and make sure that, Black trans people aren't being murdered en masse, so that we have more members of our community out there surviving, able to fight, able to take advantage of legal protections, because a non-discrimination law doesn't do you any good if you can't even survive to get to a job interview. And so I think we just have a lot, to keep fighting for, and know that, it wasn't the silver bullet victory. I think people keep looking for that in the LGBT space. Oh, we got marriage, it's over. Oh, we got this, it's over. It's like, no, it's not close to over. It's a long movement with a long history, with a lot of work left to do.
I know it says on the ACLU website, because it's the film finished a little while ago, that there's over 232 lawsuits against the Trump administration. Is there kind of
Lee has like 230 of them himself.
Now this might be my kind of ignorance. I don't know. I'm just wondering, is there sort of a positive side to all that sort of litigation, in that if you get the result that you want to get, does it sort of secure some rights that otherwise weren't as secure before Trump came into office?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Chase and Josh have been saying is critical, that you can never really achieve lasting structural systemic change without movements outside the courts. But I also think it's equally true that you can do a lot in court. You can achieve victories in court that help real people. And even if they're ultimately not completely permanent, they slow down things. And so I think they have to work in tandem. But absolutely, it's hard to say, are we winning, losing versus the Trump administration civil rights? But I do think that things would be significantly worse in all the areas we work on, in other areas in the ACLU, without all this litigation and pushing back.
And I mean, we're opportunistic. If there's a horrible thing happening, then we're going to fight back. And also, I mean, not to be, for me at least, in the trans space, like, people don't know how to talk about trans people. So if they're attacking us and that's my vehicle to get people talking, then I will. Because I think, it's not to say I want that to be the way. I'd rather it not be, but it's not all defense. Like, we have the power to reframe the narrative. So if they're attacking us, we get to reclaim that too. I mean, I don't know, Bridget, I feel like in the abortion space, it's constantly seen as defense, but you could sort of conceptualize how you move things forward, even in the context of attack. I'm not to put words.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I think, as folks are talking, I'm thinking, like, win or lose, it's creates to this the conversation, and you need all of these tools in the toolbox in order to secure rights and maintain them and enforce them. So even if we lose, the devastating losses can be a catalyst for change, and most of the time what we do in court is just hold the line. And it's incredibly important, for example, in my work, when we do that, for sometimes we can get injunctions against bad laws. That means, lots of people can get access to abortion in the meantime, even if we eventually lose. It's incredibly important for that period of time. And then if we do lose, raising the alarm bells and saying that your rights are at risk, and people need to mobilize, and people need to vote, and we need to create a country where people can access abortion care without shame and stigma and obstacles. So it's all important to the conversation. All these pieces are interrelated.
I do think.
Although I like to win, I should say. Yeah. I like to win. It's important that we win.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, like, I think the court work has been incredibly defensive. I don't think that we've actually, like, succeeded in pushing the law in a positive direction, because we get these very narrow wins on narrow grounds, just holding off the assault. But one thing that has changed is I think that the administration's actions have been so extreme that it's actually provided a lot of, like, moral clarification for a lot of people around some of the issues that I think when the Obama administration was doing things to protect trans people. Of course, like, there's a passage of time, but I think you heard some more voices being like, oh, is this government overreach? I don't know. And then, you really see with enormous clarity what this administration is doing and attacking, community after community after community. And I think it really just sort of clarifies what's really going on. And with the trans ban too, the number of people across the ideological spectrum that spoke out against kicking trans people out of the military is much bigger than the number of people that raised their voices to have them included in the first instance. So I think that there is a consolidation of support for a lot of these issues that we didn't have before. I'd rather them not be under attack in the first place, but if we're looking for silver linings, that's the one I can come up with.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just quickly on that, I think the most I'd ever seen people say positive things about trans people was after the New York Times published a headline along the lines of Trump administration to like erase transgender from existence, which was about an internal memo circulating within the Trump administration. And so that level of assault, you know, to Josh's point, triggered such an unbelievable amount of support that I had never, you know, we could never have mobilized before, which it's not ideal as a context, but it is true that it does, you know, give people a chance to reflect on like how people's experience of harm is really escalating.
And yeah, it touches on what we hear Lee say in the film, I think, about the policy being like so terrible, and then sort of a watered down version comes in, and then that doesn't seem quite as bad because it's not as bad, you know. And speaking of the military ban that got sort of announced on Twitter, the film sort of shows tweets being written very well, I think, and illustrates so well. Do you all follow Trump's tweets, or do you sort of just wait to hear about the significant ones, which is what I tend to do because I can't read them all?
I don't
follow a bot that the bot sort of cuts and pastes his tweets and puts them on like a fake White House press release. So I follow that. I don't have to see the tweets themselves. But I was reading, but I was reading Trump's tweets like live when that came out, because, you know, if folks remember, there were two tweets, and the first one says, after, you know, close consultation with my generals, I've decided ... And, you know, people thought, are we going to war with North Korea? What's going to happen? And I remember I was reading that when I was getting out of the subway, and then I was on the escalator waiting for the second tweet to come out, and having it be about trans people, it really did feel like, you know, just being, you know, like sucker punched out of nowhere. Like, what is this? Where did this come from? And like, while I was on the escalator, I sort of tweeted out, if you or anyone you know are in the military and is trans, please have them contact me. And, you know, the movie shows Chase and I, you know, reviewing, you know, potential clients, and almost all those clients responded to that tweet. We just got a huge outpouring of response.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of the negative and positive side of social media, I guess, is that, yeah. And yeah, anyone else want to comment on that following the tweets?
Yeah, definitely do not follow President Trump or any of his tweets. Yeah.
I do not either.
Self-care. I believe in some self-care.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if it pertains to my work, someone's going to tell me pretty quickly.
Yes, exactly. I just wondered how, I don't know, it might be sort of too big a question or too vague, how the current health crisis has kind of affected your work and the areas that you work in. Obviously, there are some direct things like in immigration, like the student visas, the international student visas.
Lee, do you want to start, and then I'll chime in?
Yeah, I think it's been a huge factor in a lot of our work. There are things that are getting a lot of publicity, like the student visa issue, but there are things that are going under the radar screen that are enormous. So what I think a lot of people don't realize is that because of that, the administration is using COVID as a pretext to shut down all asylum, including for children. And so I think most people know that the administration has been trying to end asylum at the southern border now for 4 years and take away protections from children. But I don't think a lot of people realize that they've now bypassed the entire asylum system and said, because of COVID, won't screen anybody for asylum, including children. And so we are challenging that now. If we don't prevail on that, then all the other things that have been done to the asylum system will be largely meaningless because there won't be any asylum. And so that's an enormous part of our work now, as well as trying to get people out of immigration detention, because it's essentially a death sentence in those immigration facilities, those adult immigration facilities. So it's been a huge part of our work now, and adding an additional layer of complexity.
And same, with abortion rights, that right out of the gate, 9 states tried to use COVID as an excuse to ban abortion. And obviously it's the same states that have passed numerous restrictions on access to abortion, including some bans on abortion. And this was really a guise, really just a pretext that they were using to shut abortion clinics down, which is what they always have wanted to do. So we had to file multiple emergency lawsuits in the first several weeks on top of our already ongoing docket. And, we won most of the cases, and some of the cases we lost. And, and we were really battling against the clock. And then in some of the cases where we lost, the state started to reopen. And only because of that were clinics allowed to see abortion patients.
How about for Chase and Joshua?
I mean, yeah, I think what we're going to see is sort of the ways in which healthcare discrimination is going to continue to sort of have an impact on the trans community. I mean, there's definitely lots of ways in which there are, so many concerns for trans survival in this context, because so many people are homeless, are underemployed, or employed in gig economies, and have lost their work altogether, although that hasn't been sort of the subject of our litigation. I think what struck me as a trans human being was how many people I knew were getting sick and dying at the beginning of COVID, and in part due to sort of so much discrimination in healthcare that people were avoiding getting care. And sort of similar to abortion, it was so many people had, gender affirming care procedures canceled as a result. And so even as hospitals are opening back up to non-emergent procedures, I think a lot of trans people are not getting their surgical care rescheduled. And so I think there's going to be a question of sort of how much is this going to be used to shut down care that hospitals don't want to provide, that insurers don't want to cover. So I think some of those things are going to play out in the coming months. And just thinking too about what it looks like, since so many of our community members are incarcerated. We know that criminalization targets trans people, and the situation in detention, as Lee mentioned, is just absolutely dire. And so, a lot of attorneys at the ACLU have been doing extra work on the context of getting people out of prison and jail and immigration detention, because of how the data that's coming out is just, the rates of transmission are, 500% higher, and the rates of death are something like 330% higher in detention. So this is a this is a crisis. So something that we have to contend with.
Yes, and I guess it fits in with the ACLU being non-partisan. Something that comes into the film is protecting free speech for everyone, whether or not you agree with what the voices are saying. And I imagine it's something that's quite difficult at times, and the film kind of touches on that with Charlottesville, doesn't it? Does anyone want to talk about that, the importance of the protection of free speech? I know it's dealt with in the film very well, I think, with that argument, but it wasn't any of you that were speaking about it, I don't think.
No, I think it's hard, and it's a constant conversation that we as you can tell from the movie, that there was a lot of internal dialogue about whether we should be taking some of these cases, and so a lot of conversation continues within the organization with our state affiliates, and so I don't know that there's it's not all tied up neatly in a bow with the right answer, but I think it's a real and real difficult kind of conversation that folks are having.
Yeah.
And I think, I mean, if you work in the law, you're gonna be working at tension points, like it's not just in the context of speech, although that's a very, obvious example. But I think, being a lawyer means contending with the consequences of your litigation choices and the other choices that you make. I mean, I've learned a ton about how to use the First Amendment, for affirmative claims on behalf of trans litigants. And because I had an organization with so many First Amendment experts, I also, as an employee, have been given the benefit of being able to speak publicly when I disagree about when we represented Milo Yiannopoulos, I issued my own statement in my own name disagreeing with the decision, and that was fully accepted by the organization. And so I think there is a lot of latitude that we're given to speak our own truth about what it feels like to be a part of an organization that makes decisions that we sometimes disagree with. And that's going to be true of any organization. It's nice to be able to say it publicly or privately.
Yeah. For me, watching the film, I kind of thought, if I had seen this at the age where I was deciding what I was going to do at university, I think it may have made me think, oh, I might do law rather than English. Was there something, just briefly, because I think this is the last question, something that made you all want to work in the area that you're working now? Was there anything sort of specific that was sort of a light bulb moment? Or?
I don't know. I don't think it was any particular moment. I think it was a sort of upbringing, and I knew I wanted to do some type of public interest social justice work. And I think for me, just my personality fit better with litigation than doing some other type of public interest work outside of the law.
And I think for me, I mean, just really early on, I became interested in access to abortion, because without being able to make, this critical decision about your body and whether to become a parent, without that ability to have control over your own bodily autonomy, then other decisions in your life are so limited. And it seemed just kind of at the crux for me of equality and being able to make your own choices.
Thank you. Josh, do you want to go next?
I keep trying to take a pass on things, and you interview.
Yeah, that's when it was on the phone. You'd be able to, but because I can see you, you can't.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess I sort of, this is a job that I guess I always sort of wanted, but never thought I'd actually be able to have. Intern with the ACLU as an undergrad and things like that. And some of this is, I mean, Chase can explain why this just, reifies existing power structures, but you grow up and, you have a model of, law being a good vehicle to change the world. And it still is. It's not the only vehicle, but it's a big one. And it's sort of like, if you're not at the table, you're what's for dinner. If you're not, protecting people, the law isn't going to protect them itself. So I think, I don't know, I feel blessed to be able to do, what I like and what I'm interested in, and have it be something that is able to make a difference in people's lives.
Thank you. Yeah. Finally, Chase.
I mean, I really, I couldn't have sort of imagined doing anything else in terms of working for and with my community. It was very much, sort of central to my sense of being in many ways. As soon as I sort of understood myself as trans and came out, I felt like there just weren't so many ways that I was seeing people being misunderstood and harmed in such violent ways that finding paths to survival seemed essential. And as someone with a lot of access to reify the structures of power, as Josh would say, of my own sense of this work, you know, I wanted to think about ways to be in it and disruptive to it, but also sort of use it and to try to hold the line, because I see that there is real power in holding the line when the encroachment is causing real harm, and when you hold that back, you can give people more space to grow and thrive and prosper when they otherwise weren't able to, and so it's been a real blessing, you know, to do it for the last, you know, many years that I've been able to, and yeah, this last 4 years or 400 or whatever it's been, it's definitely been a test, but really honored to be doing the work alongside these folks.
Well, yeah, thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for all the work you do and for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Thank you.